Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the day so far and are excited for some more. For those of you who have just joined, my name is Rachel Becker. I'm Deputy Director of Cancer and Careers, as well as our Senior In-House Social Worker. This next conversation is one that I and the rest of the CAC team have very much been looking forward to. It will explore a personal work and cancer story while weaving in actionable ideas for all of us to consider as we think about our own resilience, mental, physical, and emotional. Today, I have the privilege of welcoming Chris Vasami, a former Division I and professional baseball player who began his entrepreneurial journey in college, using his baseball skills to support other athletes and their goals. Chris has experienced firsthand the complexity of balancing family, work, and cancer after he was diagnosed in his early 30s. What he has learned as a survivor has shaped and expanded his approach to coaching. To guide today's conversation with Chris, I'd like to introduce again Rebecca Nellis, Executive Director of Cancer and Careers. Rebecca has been with CAC for more than 20 years, shaping its vision, driving its growth, and spearheading its breakthrough programs and services. In addition to her work on CAC-specific initiatives, she is active in the larger cancer community, including sitting on various committees and working groups, and is regularly called upon by media to provide expertise on the issues that sit at the intersection of work and cancer. We are beyond fortunate to have both of them here today to share their insights and expertise. So please join me in welcoming Rebecca and Chris.
Thanks, Rachel, for the wonderful introduction. And Chris, we're finally here to have this conversation that we've been texting about for months.
I know, I'm so excited.
Me too. I'm gonna jump in and part say what Rachel didn't mention is the first time I heard you speak, Chris, was as a keynote at an event that I was not expecting to hear someone on that day resonate so fully. I was thrilled to be there, but definitely wasn't expecting you. And so fast forward a few months and we have a phone call that I also think is only going to be like 30 minutes. And as we crossed the hour mark, I was like, nope, this is a whole thing. And I need to like pull you into the CAC universe and expose you to our incredible community and think about ways we can creatively work together and support each other. So this is just our second move in that direction. For those of you who follow the CAC blog, Chris participated in a Q&A with me there in April, but now we're really excited to bring that conversation to the live universe of this virtual program. So I'm going to jump in with my first question and we'll get rolling. When I named the session Building Mental and Physical Resilience, it was really just the best way I could sum up the encounters we'd had so far, Chris. It's that through your passions and life experience, you kind of, to me, embodied a constant willingness to keep building yourself. And so I'd like to start kind of very big and just ask you about the word resilience. How do you define it? What does that mean to you at this point today on this Friday? June 27th, somewhere around 10:15 in the morning Eastern time. How do you think about resilience?
Let me start by saying I always look at opportunities to speak almost as game days for me, being an athlete. But about 2 minutes before we started, I got chills. This is different. It's just going to hit different. It is hitting different. So thank you really for the opportunity, and thank you all for being here and allowing me the opportunity to share. Now to your question, resilience. Resilience is our ability to take what we've gone through, digest it, learn from it, know that it won't be the last time that we go through it, but hopefully because of learning, because of reflecting, now we are stronger, and our ability to work through the obstacles as opposed to retreat just makes us be stronger. Resilience to me is armor. It's mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual armor that we have, and the more that we go through and the stronger that armor is, the thicker that armor becomes. And resilience is also being able to know what you're capable of.
Mm. So I want to now take us back a little bit. Let's talk about baseball. You obviously don't, and I'm going to be very clear. I am a Chicago Cubs fan from birth to this moment. We're having a great season. I'm just putting it out there. But you obviously don't get to Division I schools or the Rockies organization without committing early to the game, which I think speaks to you kind of much more largely as a person as well, right? You had a goal, you were zeroed in on it. But you also started a business while you were still working towards your professional athlete goal. So I'd like to get that sort of story for our audience so that we can build on that, because there's obviously so much to the dedication of being an athlete at that level. And then to decide while you're still in the throes of that, that you should, I don't know, be entrepreneurial, I think
Right.
is again, helping us build towards this larger conversation we're going to have this morning.
It was my sophomore year of college. I was in a collision at first base, last game of the year, and I ended up blowing out my left shoulder, my catching shoulder, and figured out that I needed to have surgery that summer.
Okay.
And so came home, and we decided that I was going to have surgery at the end of July, and this is, first week of June. And here we are. And my mom said, you need to go get a job because you're not going to sit around all summer and not doing anything while you wait for surgery. And so here we are, and all the internships had already been started, and a lot of the jobs, I just couldn't find anything. So I decided to go to the computer and use some good old clip art, and I put together a flyer and I put it up around town, and I ended up getting a couple phone calls. And essentially that's how Vasami training started. I spent the whole summer, working with kids and training kids, and I really enjoyed it. And so being able to go and just see kind of the impact that I could have and how I enjoyed it. Now I need to say this. This is I have to fair warn it that I was not the same teacher then than I am now.
That feels like important perspective, because
yes.
Chris, weren't you like 20?
Yes,
at
I
the
was
time?
20 years old at the time, and I believe that everybody wanted to be a professional baseball player as bad as I did.
Right.
So my level of expectations were very high for a 9-year-old.
Right.
And so and so
I think there's an important lesson there for all of us, actually, which we can come back to. Also, give me, just so that we're placing it, this was like 2004-ish, 5-ish? Are we somewhere in that time?
2005. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, 2005. And so I end up end up enjoying it, and it just kind of bloomed from there. It kind of blossomed. Anytime I was home, I would work with people, and then getting drafted, and as I saw my career wind down, that's when I started to really want to be more of the entrepreneur and really ramp this up. And so I started working with a behavioral psychologist so I could understand, how do people learn? How do people think? How, 7, 9, 11, 15, 18-year-olds, what is their learning process? How are they going to do this? And just really totally understanding that the other person's 23 hours and 15 minutes of a day were going to dictate the 45 minutes that we were going to spend together. So I wanted to be as prepared and equipped as I could for that.
Sounds like you applied a similar mindset to developing yourself as a coach as you did to develop yourself as a player. And so it all roots back to that kind of very disciplined goal setting around reaching the highest level of professional play you could get to.
Absolutely.
What position did you play?
So in high school, I was a first baseman pitcher. And then in college, I was a first baseman. I ended up getting drafted as a first baseman, and then they made me a catcher. So I've done a little bit of everything.
Yeah. I am seeing quite a bit of baseball team preferences happening in the chat, and I will choose to keep all personal smack talk out of my professional life for the purposes of this conversation. But feel free to email me. My email's on the CAC website if you want to talk baseball separate from this.
I always like to
I
say
am,
we're glad you're here.
we are, Chris is right. Even if you're a division rival. Okay, so moving towards a conversation that is obviously deeply relevant to this audience. You had established your training business and you'd been self-employed for a while before you received your cancer diagnosis, right? Like you were settled into
Yes.
coaching state. So when you first got diagnosed, we're going to talk about a lot of this, but specifically, what went through your head when it came to your work that you had built up for yourself, and how did that immediately impact the day-to-day kind of work life, cancer news, cancer treatment? What did that look like for you?
The first thought was, how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
Because I am the business. I'm the trainer. I'm the mentor. I'm the coach. I throw 800 pitches a day in batting practice. I'm demonstrating swings. How am I going to do this? And so being able to wrap my head around that, and you know, the first thing is no one going to want to come to me anymore? Is no one going to want to train with me anymore? Am I physically going to be able to do this? You know, am I going to lose weight? Am I going to gain weight? Am I going to, from an energy standpoint, will I be able to be the same? Will my brain work the same? I mean, all of those things had gone through my head at some point. And then ultimately it's, how am I going to, well, if I can't work, how am I going to pay the bills? If I can't pay the bills, how am I going to keep a business? And so it's just, you're already spiraling. It just adds more spirals to that.
So tell the community, what was your diagnosis? What was your treatment? So we can get a sense of what that looked like for you in context of that job that you were doing.
So I was originally diagnosed with papillary thyroid cancer. And it was interesting because I had gone through months of other doctors trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And it was one of those things where I was 31 years old. I was 3 years into my marriage. I was 2 years retired from playing baseball. And all my zeal for life just went away. I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to work out. I didn't want to, you know, have date nights with my wife. I didn't want to work. It was a matter of my happy places were the bed or the couch. And it was just so far removed from who I am and who I was and who I knew myself to be. And so I had gone to a bunch of doctors, and the first couple of doctors I went to were urologists. And we took blood and found out that my testosterone was that of a, you know, 80-plus-year-old at the age of 31. And so my first thing was, great, what are we going to do about it? And their first thing was, well, let's do synthetic pellets and we'll get your testosterone up. So I went home, and we'll talk about this in, you know, in terms of the ability to advocate for yourself. But I went home and I looked up side effects of these synthetic pellets. And the number one thing is infertility. So I called my doctor back up and I was like, I don't think this is for me at the age that I'm at. And he said, well, if you want kids, it's reversible. We can just reverse it. I go, again, give me the root. I want to understand the root, and then give me facts, and then we can figure stuff out. So long story short, went to a couple of different doctors. I got on Clomid, which is an estrogen blocker, which was a fun journey in of itself, you know. And then finally went to an endocrinologist, and she was the first person to put her hands on me. She felt a giant lump in my neck that day in the office, and she said, did you know you had this? And I said, no. She goes, can I do an ultrasound? I said, sure. And she found 6 tumors that day on my thyroid. And that was December 13th. 2 weeks later, December 26th, I'm having a biopsy done on it. And I remember walking out of the office that day with my father, who was with me, and I was like, Dad, I can't believe I have cancer. He goes, no, come on, don't say that. We don't know that yet. I go, Dad, it's December 26th. What are we doing here? Why are we here? There's no reason to be here. So we should be celebrating, you know, the Christmas gifts we just got yesterday and stuff. We're not getting a biopsy. And interesting enough, almost 2 weeks later, January 5th, 2017, ironically, I'm at the gym in the middle of a workout. And my energy was, felt pretty good. The music was blasting. My playlist was fire, as all the little ones like to call it these days. And I literally had just gotten done deadlifting like 500 pounds. And I dropped the bar and my phone rang, and it was my doctor, letting me know that I had thyroid cancer.
Do you remember that first thought? I mean, it was loud. You were in a public space. What did you do immediately?
So immediately the first thing was I just kind of made my way down an empty hallway, and I
Yeah.
just sat down, and my mind was kind of blank. And my doctor always called me Christopher. And I just remember the first thought was just another example that when someone calls me Christopher, nothing good's about to happen.
Partly I ask that because, as you can imagine, in the work that we do at Cancer and Careers, we hear a lot of stories about people who are in the middle of their workday when the phone call finally comes from the doctor that confirms the suspicions, the conversations, the seeking out, and figuring out how to process information like that in a space that isn't your own, that isn't next to a loved one, that is, and kind of have to pick yourself up and keep going in that moment, let alone the much larger pick yourself up and keep going, is really challenging. And in the workplace also brings up questions of disclosure, which we're going to come to in a second as well. But I think people don't realize, when they haven't lived it, how frequently this information is relayed in a not ideal environment for the person who's hearing it. And I think shouting that from the rooftops is one of the things on my list, that to be aware of. Which is why in the last panel, when some of the doctors were talking about understanding their whole patient, that's part of it. Like, what is your whole patient story? Where might they be when you are picking up the phone to provide this information? And how do you get them in a way that's safest for them? And that's really difficult. I'm seeing people put in the chart that they learned about their diagnosis by going on to the portals, because now we live in a portal world. And so these are all things that could be done with more humanity and awareness, I think. And when you were talking, and I want to hear more about this, about advocacy, right? So this was not a straightforward path. This was actually, it stunned me when you said that endocrinologist was the first person who actually touched your form, and just like, that's a long road. And how did that change how you encountered the medical care universe after that?
It took another traumatic experience before I got to that part that you speak of. I, ended up doing my surgery and treatment at Sloan Kettering up there in New York.
Yep.
And my surgeon was amazing. Couldn't have been better, could have been nicer, could have been more understanding and personable and human. My first endocrinologist oncologist that I had at Sloan, I mean, long story short, she literally gave up on me because everything that she did in her protocol didn't work on me. Just for context, I'm 6'4", 265 pounds. And I'm an athlete, and I still believe I'm an athlete, and I still work out like I'm an athlete, and I have a job that demands energy and things like that. And it was one of those things where she was treating me as if I was a 5'4", 130-pound woman. And so the medicine was wrong, and the doses were wrong, and the times of day was wrong, and all these things, and I got worse, and it was just not within her protocol. It wasn't, a standard treatment. And so, but it took me relapsing, essentially, more cancer, a year later being back for surgery, that we found out that I had a certain type of cancer called TULSA, which only 4% of thyroid cancer patients have. And it's more aggressive in nature, and it's even more aggressive because I'm also a man. and testosterone plays a part in it. And
Okay.
we also come to find out is that by not having my meds correct and my hormones flying all over the place, it was putting fertilizer on this cancer. All things that we didn't know, and all things I had to go through. So to answer your question, how does it make me change how I look at the medical world? I now walk into a doctor's office, and unless you are an orthopedist, which is bones, ligaments, tendons, which good thing bones, ligaments, and tendons haven't changed in 5,000 years, I will literally look at the doctor and say, hey, just so we get this clear, you're a doctor, I'm a patient, you're practicing medicine, you're going to practice on me, we're going to have a great relationship if we can have that understanding right off the bat. And they are taken aback by it.
Yeah. Yeah. But
But
your encounters with the medical world to get you to that point suggests that's the only way that Chris should be proceeding to ensure that
100%.
you take your learnings and you learn how to advocate for yourself. And frankly, you
Yeah.
share your story so that other people know that these are questions to be asking.
Because I did. I sat around for the first year and waited for doctors in science and
Right.
medicine to do their job, and it didn't do anything. And I fell deeper and darker into holes I shouldn't have been in. Didn't have the information I should have had. Gain 60 pounds, lose 60 pounds. I mean, it was running the gamut, but at the same time, also sitting there at the same time being the victim.
Right. Right.
And you know, and I'm sitting there on the couch with a pint of ice cream in between my legs, being like, why can't I stop staring at this commercial? Like, why am I bawling right now? What's going on?
Yeah. I mean, one of the hard parts is that you don't know what you don't know. So of course you go in trusting the people who know more about something than you do. And no one here is saying, don't trust the medical community. That's not the upshot of Chris and Rebecca's time together. And we have a lot more to talk about, but there is a degree of advocacy matters and knowing that you're allowed to ask questions. It's why we include a doctor's panel of the great examples of doctors, so you know what it should look like to encounter a medical professional. But you couldn't have known these things until you lived the wrong things. And the goal isn't for everyone to live those wrong things, right? That's a very dangerous goal. And so to be able to speak your mind, not overly rely on the internet. Dr. Google doesn't have all the answers either, but info seek, get second opinions. Don't be afraid to hurt your medical professionals' feelings, which is a big thing we encounter. Those are not the paths forward to getting the best care for you as an individual.
Oh, and I think at the end of the day, it's being able to feel empowered, understanding that this is your journey, and it's singular. And it's, you know, one of the worst things that happened with me was that because it was papillary thyroid cancer and quote unquote the good one, and you know, people have had this, people would say, you know, and they would give me and my wife advice or just words of encouragement. Was, you know, hey, Rebecca had this, you know, she was back to work in like 4 weeks, Chris will be fine. So and so had this, so and so had this. And so we had ultimately the wrong expectations walking into this.
Yeah. We actually talk a lot about what to say and what not to say, in the hopes that we can help people learn good empathetic language versus well-intended but not great language. There at 11:30, there's a session where some of that is going to be covered, because it is difficult and people are not coming from a malicious or bad-minded place, but they don't realize the power of words for someone in a vulnerable moment. And so you want to learn how to be present and supportive without toxic positivity or false expectations, or like there are all of these pitfalls. I'm going to steer us a little bit back, although I can feel the team in the background going, she's gone completely off book. I'm going to steer us mildly back, because I'm wondering how you, at that point, again, I want to make sure people understand Chris is like, you know, 10, 11 years into his coaching business when this diagnosis is happening. Did you disclose to clients? Did you stop work for some period of time? Like, how did you weave, especially now that we know just the depths of your experience and the length of time that it took to get the right diagnosis and the right treatments working? How did you communicate that? How did you work or not work? What did that look like?
I worked up until the day of surgery.
Okay.
It was not so much, it was just being open and vulnerable with all my clients. You know, being open with the parents, being open with my players. You know, the ones who obviously I thought were old enough and mature enough to just to understand. But I worked up until the day of surgery, and I took, you know, as much time off as I could, as I felt comfortable enough to take off. I'm also I just love to work, and I love
Yeah.
to be around people, and so being around people at half capacity is better than me laying in a bed.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but it was a matter of, I've learned this: healthy people ask for what they want.
Mm.
And so when you sit there and you ask for, you know, just, hey, it's just some understanding that these sessions might not look the same for a little while until I get my feet back under me and I understand um, what I can do and can't do, and you know, and people are willing to absolutely meet you where you are when you ask for exactly what you want. And so it was interesting because one thing that also helped me, and it was, you know, a blessing, you know, at the time I was like, oh, it just seems like another expense, but I had gone through Northwestern Mutual and I had gotten disability insurance as a solopreneur. Again, I got it not thinking I would be cashing in on it 7 months later, but it was one of the best things that I could have done, because I wasn't working and I had a legit reason that I wasn't working, and I didn't have paid time off or anything like that. So that was definitely one of the things that allowed me to kind of have peace of mind, was that no, I was not going to be making what I would normally make in a month, but you know, necessities were covered, bills were going to be covered, and I felt like I could, you know, if I needed more time to recover, I absolutely could.
That's such a great example of being grown up about things, when your instincts, I think often at that point in our lives, are to feel like that's not likely going to be a thing I'm going to need anytime soon, so why am I, you know, managing this, doing the paperwork, paying into it, etc. And then the reason is this, because you don't know what
Hmm.
is going to happen. You also said something that deeply resonates, again, not surprisingly, with things we talk about all the time. Work is, of course, paycheck, financial security, often access to health insurance for people and other benefits, but it's also part of our identity, our community, our way of
Hmm.
contributing to the world, all of these things that are about us as a whole person. And that was no less true for you than it would be for anyone else who experiences that. And I think the more that the larger public sees people who are choosing work in part because of those reasons, the more the work world changes with them, which is sort of my big picture goals, is that systemically
Hmm.
the work world changes to accept the realities of people's whole selves within their spaces, which we still have some work to do, Chris, but that's not this conversation. But I do think you landed there so naturally. We talk about this with employers, we talk about this with healthcare providers, we talk about this with individuals who've been diagnosed. Work is more than a paycheck and insurance. It doesn't mean those aren't critical
Absolutely.
things, but it is more than that. And when you reduce it to only that, you can sometimes be leaving out a lot of a person and what they need.
Hmm. It's, human connection is real.
Yeah.
You know, for most of us, we thrive on it. Um, for most of us, we don't know how much we need it. We don't know how much we would miss it. And the ability to have support, the ability to have someone to talk to, the ability just to be able to take your mind off it for 5 minutes. I mean, these things are they're intangible, valuable things that really need to be a part of someone's cancer journey, especially when it comes to their career. You're, I say this all the time, you know, I played baseball. I was lucky enough to play till I was 28 and a half years old. I didn't get to give baseball back on my terms.
Yeah.
And so when you find something that is your own,
Yeah.
and most of us it's our career and our work, I'm not willing to give up, and I'm not willing to give it back on someone else's terms.
Yeah.
And especially because of a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
And so being able to have the power to blend all the different worlds together um, means a lot.
So speaking of that blending, I want to pull from both sides of your experience. For a lot of people who get diagnosed with cancer, a big challenge is getting used to a body that's different or changed or
Mm.
might not feel like their own anymore. And that can have a very real impact in general, but also at work and how you're received and how people experience you. First, given your own background as an athlete and as a human, how did you handle that? You mentioned weight fluctuations, you mentioned not feeling like yourself. How did you sort of mentally overcome that feeling of foreignness in your own skin?
The first thing is my definition of hard changed forever. Before my diagnosis, hard was, math class and SATs and wanting a Division I scholarship, and hard was sitting at a kitchen table with my parents choosing a scholarship between Vanderbilt, Notre Dame, and Duke. I mean, could you imagine the
Woo!
horror?
Woo!
Um, you know, Getting drafted, being a part of the team, being on a bus for 20 hours, starting your own business, like that was hard. And then you get diagnosed, and hard has now changed forever. And it's multiple surgeries and multiple cocktails worth of meds, and gain 60 pounds, lose 60 pounds. I thought hitting a 95-mile-an-hour baseball was hard. Hard is living with uncontrollable hormones. That's what hard is. And not being able to even understand who you are, because mentally and physically you're just so disconnected. And so being able to kind of wrap your head around that you are different. I think that's one of the downfalls of being a cancer patient is I just want to go back to normal. I just want to go back to the way it used to be. But that's not the reality. The reality of it now is that things are different. You're different. Physiologically, chemically, I am a totally different person. I'm literally dependent on 5 medicines now for the rest of my life. And if they don't work, I don't work. And it's understanding and coming to terms with that and coming to grips with it and being okay with it. And so, and feeling the confidence to be able to look at somebody when they tell you you don't need that medicine and say, you don't know actually what you're talking about. Thanks though. My definition of thriving is different now. My definition of success is different now. And so, and with that comes the ability to be more in tuned with who I am and what makes me feel good and what makes me doesn't feel good, more than it ever did when I was a professional athlete. And I was pretty good back then.
So I'm going to flag that my internet has started to. What I want to move to next is when you're thinking about having new limits, right? Like because things have changed, you might need to set new boundaries with people. And that gets harder, I imagine, if you think about it with your clients versus family, where you're hoping they will forgive momentary outbursts of boundary needs or reshaping of relationships. But how did you think about that? Did you have to think about that? How might you encourage other people to think about boundary setting?
The first thing is to recognize how to give yourself grace. And it's because when you can give yourself grace, then you can actually figure out how other people can give you grace. As I said, I was living with uncontrollable hormones. I would turn into the Incredible Hulk out of nowhere. I would have these outbursts, and I would do it in situations that I never would have done it before. There were times where, admittedly, I would embarrass my wife. I would lash out at her for no reason in a public place or in front of her family. And again, these are things that I never did before. So these outbursts really were more shocking than anything. And it really wasn't until I got to the deep root of how sick I was and how, the meds, how important they were to me, that I was able to sit there and recognize in myself, like maybe when something was about to happen, and then either apologizing for what might happen, or more importantly, just being able to excuse myself from the situation.
Mm.
And then because I was able to now recognize these things and give myself grace in the situation, I was then able to have a more understanding support group and a more understanding um, environment.
Mm. You've said so many things that are swirling that I can't get them all out of my face at once. So I want to talk about, while I keep thinking about them, I want to talk about fatigue a little bit, because we actually hear a lot that exercise can help address it versus, like make it worse, which is what feels logical, at least to me. But it can also feel impossible to start if you're already managing treatment, work, family, kids, parents, all of that stuff. And you might just genuinely feel like, I am too exhausted to do this. What is one small thing, like one Chris coach tangible thing that a person might think about to sort of reset or overcome those mental obstacles, if not the actual physical feelings?
I would say the first thing is to put your ego away
Okay.
and get over the fact that 10 minutes is not good enough.
Oh.
10-15 minutes is wonderful. Again, the way that our minds work, we would rather choose a comfortable hell than an unknown heaven.
Hmm.
And even and those comfortable hells, they're there for a reason. They're easy to go back to. They're comfortable. They make us feel safe in an interesting way. So I'm a firm believer in choosing hard every single day, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, putting yourself in positions to build in resilience.
Hmm.
And if that's 10 minutes of you getting out of bed and walking, great. 10 will turn into 11, 11 will turn into 14, 14 will turn into 21. The problem is that because we don't believe that we have the courage to take the last step, we'll never take the first step.
That's
And well, go ahead.
I was just going to say that's so interesting, because my first thought was you were going to say 10 minutes will turn into 20. So I just proved your point, because you said 10 minutes will turn into 11 minutes, not 20.
That's right. And again, for me, it's going back to learning what you have control of.
Mm.
And for me, sitting around and waiting for doctors in science and medicine to do their job, I got worse. It wasn't
Mm.
good. It wasn't a good feeling. And so here I am going, wait, hold up. I played professional baseball. I played college baseball. There was a certain system that went into me being able to do that. Most of us have the tools. We just can't find the toolbox.
Mm.
Like we don't need another podcast. We don't need another book. We need to go out and prove to ourselves that we can do it. And so for me, it was a matter of being able to sit there and say, okay, man, like, how can we implement the tools that you already have into this new system over here, which is fighting cancer?
Mm.
And so, proving that 10 minutes I could do it, 11 minutes I could do it, 15 minutes I can do it, turned into getting back to, full workouts. And
Mm.
now I'm at a point where 7 days a week I work out because I have to,
Mm.
because I need to, because
Mm.
it's the one thing that I can control. And as I
Mm.
said before, I'm now not responsible for why this is happening to me. My
Mm.
responsibility has fully shifted to how can I respond to what's happening to me? And now how can I actually prepare for what's going to happen to me?
Mm.
And that comes through disciplined action. And
Mm.
and the problem is that someone wants to sit there and say, yeah, but a 2-hour workout once a week is more time than 10 minutes every day. And I go, you're absolutely right. But not with the compounding effect that 10 minutes every day will have on not just our body, but also our mind.
Mm. It's such a great point. I'm going to be thinking a lot about how I managed to prove your point immediately in my own brain after we get off, when the days when I'm just, and 10 minutes could be enough. Did your relationship with food change after your cancer diagnosis, which is a leading question to how do you think about nutrition coaching post-diagnosis? So I want the personal and then the bigger picture thoughts on that.
Yeah, I kind of ran the gamut. When we first thought that possibly, with all the new meds that were being introduced, that I was having trouble being able to take all the meds and have and digest them properly and break them down properly. So for the first, probably 3 years, I just took out all gluten.
Oh, wow.
And just try to make it as easy as possible for me to, break down foods and break down my supplements and break down my my medicine. And then as I started to kind of regulate that piece, then I started to add things back in. And again, going back to, I don't have a thyroid. I have, severe hypothyroidism now as a result of thyroid cancer. And what I've come to learn is that I can eat carbs. I just can't eat them after like 3 o'clock because my body's natural mode is to shut down. Men in general, our natural mode is to shut down around 5 o'clock. So you take that and the two things combine, and I just came to learn that, carbs after 3 just don't work for me. But I will eat carbs all morning, especially, around my workouts. And it's just being able to be, as I said, getting in tune with what you're eating, why you're eating it, and more importantly, how you feel after you eat it. I think a lot of us, me in general, I tell people all the time, one of my favorite places is in the pantry eating while I'm trying to figure out what I want to eat.
I feel that one.
And so, so being able to kind of understand the patterns. And one of the other things too that I try to help people understand is don't be afraid of routines. Don't be afraid to eat the same stuff 5 days a week. Let the exciting meals be for the night out. Let the chefs do the work for you. And again, because I believe all the knowledge turns into power, and then wisdom is the experience that you do with the knowledge that you have. So if I'm eating most of the same stuff throughout the week and I feel a certain way throughout the week based off of that stuff, well then, yeah, if I go to a restaurant and I eat something that I would normally cook for myself, and I wake up the next day and, there's 3 pounds more on the scale that day, like I understand why. I'm not going to end up spiraling. I'm not going to end up going into something to a place that I don't need to go into. So it all has, yes, it has all changed. When I was an athlete, I, would eat a lot. And because I knew it was going somewhere that day, it was being used that day.
Right.
Whereas now, yes, everything is much more purposeful. There's more intent, and it all falls under the category in my mind of things that are going to help me thrive.
Yeah. It's also, your answer to this one feels deeply connected to your answer to the last one, which is that we often, for good reason and in crisis and with a lot of information coming our way and a lot of other responsibilities, leap to perfection instead of identification of small steps forward. So if it can't be perfect food or a perfect awareness of how it works, we fall all the way over to the other side of, well, then I just can't. We think 10 minutes isn't enough for a walk as to count as exercise in some way. So we don't do that because it won't be an hour workout. And I think altogether, what this says is stuff that I think, sure, do we hear it in lots of different ways? If you spend any time on the internet, you're getting good and bad information at every given moment. But hearing it from you, because it's a lived thing, is so powerful, because the fact that you can eat carbs before 3 is a really important discovery if you happen to be someone who likes a carb, right? And so it's not no, never, or suffer because of. It was figuring out, which is an iterative process, just like building the muscle of take the 10-minute walk, take the 11-minute walk, take the 12-minute walk. And I think taken together, it's such a great reminder that you're not aiming for something perfect. You're aiming for figuring out what works for you, and what works for you might not look the same as what works for somebody else. And we can get easily lost in that, I think, now when we see everybody and their mother telling us what they ate today, what they purchased at the grocery store, how much exercise they got, you know, all of that information coming at us, whether we're looking for it or not, can really skew purposeful strategy and the grace you've been talking about.
Oh, and I also, I would love everybody on this call to learn 3 very simple words. Good for you. I say it all the time. People tell me this, people tell me that. They tell me what they're doing. They tell me what I should do. They tell me, good for you. I'm so happy. Like the fact that you sat there and figured that out, awesome. Love it. Good for you. And it just doesn't, because it doesn't work for me.
Yeah. That's so great.
And, you know, and so it's one of those things where, look, what binds us as humans is struggle. And there's no, not saying that cancer is more struggling than divorce or anything. It's struggle. So it's the idea of understanding the human aspect, the empathy of it. And look, at the end of the day, like, you know, our blood is red and our money is green. Like, and we struggle. And hopefully on the other side is empathy. But you know, what I believe is that when you start to embrace the struggle and you start to put purpose to your pain, and you run into the darkness instead of run from it, and you understand that adversity actually leads to unbelievable opportunity for growth, like, well, on the other side is there's so much joy and strength and wisdom in this life. And I mean, ultimately that shows us what we're capable of. That shows us like how alive we are, and the beauty of how to constantly evolve what success looks like for us.
That's so right. And I think it's easy to lose sight of for a million super valid reasons, but it's so accurate. This is not my next question, and typically we ask people to put their questions in the Q&A box, but I did just see someone in the chat desperately want to know if you still eat sweets at all.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, you name it. And it'll be my favorite post-workout meal.
Right. That's great.
Absolutely.
So you've touched on this a bit already, and I think this last segment of our conversation very much so, but I think a lot about the fact that your coaching has evolved a little bit with your experience of almost the last decade and cancer. And also, I think with your interest to be someone who can coach not just people aiming to be a certain kind of athlete, but people aiming to be a whole, fully formed person. And so when you think about the fact that your lens still comes certainly from being an elite athlete, that physical strength and mental strength are obviously just part of your core makeup, right? Like that is part of how Chris became Chris. How do you think about coaching people, or broadly sharing with this audience, people who aren't in that mindset, or who athleticism wasn't their thing, but they have another thing? You know what does that make sense?
Yeah. There's the first thing that most of us need to understand, and I implore people to do, because it is a skill. You know, the problem with skill set is everybody's like, oh, you're just born with it. No, like we're all born with the same 4 things. Some of us, things that come easier to us than others,
Sure.
but for the most part, everything can be worked on. Okay. Now, will I ever be a fast runner? No, I'm not going to be a fast runner, but I can be faster tomorrow than I was yesterday. That's the idea. So we want our strengths to continue to be as strong as possible, and we want our weaknesses to be stronger than they were yesterday. And the idea is, one of the things for me that really helped me was my ability to learn how to grieve and have gratitude at the same time.
Mm.
It, for me, here I was grieving the life that I used to have as a professional athlete, doing whatever I could, whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. I'm grieving the life I currently have because it's hard. And I'm grieving the life that I'm going to have because I got to go give blood every 12 weeks to get my levels checked. And I am constantly dependent on medicine. And I'm constantly worried, what if the pharmacy runs out of my medicine? And, these things they're not going away. But at the same time, the ability to have that balance of gratitude in the middle of that grief has been one of the biggest things that has helped me.
Mm.
And it's waking up, understanding that gratitude is a muscle that needs to be worked out every day, no different than your 10-minute walk.
Mm.
Because it's not something that just naturally comes to us all the time. There's a lot of times where we have to shift our perspective back into gratitude and do these things. And it's interesting because, and gratitude becomes your outward appreciation for your life and what's going on and who is in it. And not enough of us practice it. We don't practice it as soon as we wake up. We don't practice it throughout the day. We don't thank our bodies for the ability of what they're doing. We don't thank us for, we don't thank for the moment we have. We don't thank for the lessons that we've learned. We don't thank, for the struggles that we've had. And so, an exercise that I usually do, and everybody on this call can do it. You grab your phone, you find somebody to text, and you say, "I'm grateful for you," or "I appreciate you." And it's interesting. It takes 30 seconds, and most of the time, when I have people do that live in person, they're staring at their phone, smiling. And I always say, you're all smiling. The person who's getting the message is smiling. Now, fair warning, some of us might get a message back that says, "Oh gosh, what happened? Oh no, what'd you do?" And it's one of those things where it goes to show that clearly these conversations need to be happening more often.
Yeah.
Because if you're writing somebody going, "I appreciate you, I'm grateful for you, I love you," and they're going, "What's wrong?" There's probably a disconnect. So that was one of the first things, is the ability to grieve and have gratitude at the same time. And I think and what that does is it empowers us to be able to be okay with whatever's coming our way that day. And it takes us out of the victim mindset and puts us into the victor mindset. It allows us to stop renting our life. It allows us to start owning our life and everything that comes into our life. Because there's ways that, we feel more prepared now. We feel more empowered. We feel more courageous to be able to take on what's going on. So those are some of the things that we do first and foremost, is just helping people how to dig differently into their life and look at it from a different perspective, to understand, the skill set that they actually have. And then how do we go to work? And so there's a lot of times where I want daily discipline over Monday motivation. We've all done it. We wake up and go, "This is the Monday." No, this is the Monday. This is the Monday. Well, Rebecca, we do that 52 times and the year's over.
Yeah.
And now we're on to our New Year's resolutions. And by February 15th, those are done. And so it's just the continuous spiral. So I'm looking for people to want to understand that they have the power to break that cycle. And by looking at it, saying, "This is what I need. This is what I want. This is how I'm going to go about it. And these are my non-negotiables, and no one's getting in the way. Not even my most special person, significant other is going to get in the way of this." You wake up feeling more fulfilled each day.
So much relevant reframing, which I think is it takes me back to why I was so surprised to encounter you that morning in October, because I think that the way in which you've reframed and the way in which you can link your existing passions to your cancer experience to marrying the two of them is so resonant for people. And it's a good reminder. I think gratitude is an interesting one for me because it's something that I'm focused on personally, and part of it came from having had some early work experiences where I did not have a boss that I particularly enjoyed, and kind of deciding to figure out what were the issues and do the opposite of those as my approach to growing into roles that had direct reports. And so one of those things was gratitude. I worked in a lot of places early on in my professional life where there was no gratitude for someone in roles like mine. And that was so off-putting, and that was so disconnected to how I viewed the world and how I viewed my role in the work that we were doing. And so for me, that's what resonated just then, was that sort of, you know, how do you decide who you go through the world as? Well, some of it is based on, of course, the experiences that you have, the encounters that you have. And so it really speaks to me to think about how important it is to tell people that you appreciate them. It also reminds me, and I have to say, I'm not typically remotely aware of trends on social media, but I did catch wind of this men calling men to say goodnight thing, because men don't tend to have the same sort of communication styles with each other as women do. And that the couple clips that I've seen of it is just utter confusion from the person on the other end of the phone about why their buddy is reaching out in such a way. But my goodness, is that a valuable, maybe accidental joke or hilarity originally, but speaks to a huge thing that I think connects to what you're talking about, which is vulnerability is important. Being open to receive connection is as important as being open to give it.
It's interesting. There's a lot of times, and I'll put this up on social media, you know, every few months. I'll just put a video. I wake up early every day. I'm up at 4:30 every day. And so I hear the birds a lot. And I remind people, I'll just put a video of birds chirping. And I'll remind people that birds chirp in the morning to let each other know they made it through the night. That's why they do it. And so I ask, you know, who are you saying good morning to? You know, if waking up in the morning craving human connection is exactly what we should be doing.
Yeah.
It fulfills us. It gives us purpose. It gives us hope. Like, all these things are very important. Because yes, albeit there's so many times where we're going through this cancer journey and it's no one knows what I'm going through. 100%. No one does. Even if they've had the same diagnosis on the same timeline, all that, like, no one knows what you're going through. So reach out and just find that connection.
Yeah. So we don't have a ton of time left, but I did want to kind of circle back for a second on the fact that in the literature and the dialogue, you were diagnosed as a young adult, right? Like, you were 31 years old. I believe you just recently technically became an alumni of the age range that is young adult cancers. Not that I want to call you out for your age. Welcome, by the way. But I do want to just, as we move to wrap up, I think it's such a profound moment in time, and we certainly have some people on today who were also diagnosed as a young adult. But also, you brought in fertility, and the doctors talked about it a little bit. I want to make sure you share with the audience that, in fact, you do have 2 girls, right?
I do.
And so those things that were important to you, you were able to proceed and to make happen, and to continue to evolve through your 30s with this new part of your life experience.
Yeah, I mean, full transparency, out of a possible 24 symptoms, I've had 23. And the only symptom I haven't had is infertility. But that doesn't go with saying that I took Cialis for a long time to be able to have sex with my wife, to be able to have my daughters. So, and again, going back to, look, no one has more ego than a professional baseball player. Okay. So the ability to sit there and just, that was a whole transition. That was a whole new identity piece, being able to get through that, saying, no, like this is different now. Okay. And so, you're sitting there going, wait, I shouldn't have to do this to do this. But guess what? You have to. Like, this is what the situation calls for now. And so am I sitting there, ashamed that I had to take Cialis to have my daughters? No. All I care about is that I have my daughters.
Yeah.
And so it's these little things that no one prepares you for. It's these, and again, because you're different, and the things that you want and the things that you need, and the feelings that you have, and some of the things that used to be rainbows are not rainbows anymore. It's being able to sit there and be okay with all of it, because we're still here, we still have a chance, and every day that we get to wake up it's a really good day. It's a sunny day. Unless you're literally in the middle of the storm, it's a sunny day. And for most of us, we have rainy moments, but because of our victim mentality, it turns into rainy days, and it shouldn't be that way. And so, it's this overall approach to life, saying, I can't believe how far I've come. Please bring on whatever else there is.
That's so great. First of all, I could talk to you for another hour, and I'm not even sure the audience would be upset by that, except for the fact that we still have a whole agenda to get through. But this was spectacular, and I'll get back to those feelings in a second. But I'm gonna ask you one more. And for the people monitoring me in the background, thinking I jumped around quite a lot, I did. But this was my plan to ask you as the last question, which is, and I think you've given a lot of it. But let's shift your lens from sort of speaking your live other people who are living that experience, and think about what you would say to the people around people who have been diagnosed, employers, colleagues, friends, family, like that constellation that surrounds a person, about what it's truly like to navigate work and life after a diagnosis, in treatment, in ongoing maintenance, in recovery. What would you want them to understand the most that might really help the people listening think about how to talk to their own communities?
The first thing that you can say is, I'm sorry you have to go through this, period. End the statement there, done. I'm sorry you have to go through this, period. Not but, not end, not, hey, here's a story, I'm trying to pump you up. No, I'm sorry you have to go through this, period. What can I do? And then just wait and see and listen. What do you need today? Check in. How's it going? Can I make you dinner?
Yeah.
Can I drop you off dinner? Do you even like dinner anymore right now?
Well, actually,
Yeah.
it's funny. You're echoing something we say a lot, which is, if it's possible, be specific with your offer. So you're not asking someone to come up with a way for you to help them in their hard moment. So like, I love, do you even like dinner? Because that's such a great extension of that, which is like, maybe you don't want food at all,
Yeah.
but that's where I'm starting.
Yeah. It's support comes in many different ways, and sometimes support, doesn't need to be all hands on all the time. It's just, it's the little check-ins. It's giving space. It's having awareness a lot of times. And there's times where fine means fine, and there's times where fine means I'm not fine.
Yeah.
And so being able to have that support, and being able to have that awareness of the people around, is really important. And so as a supporter, be okay knowing that support is going to be forever evolving throughout the person's journey.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think actually that one gets lost a little bit, and it kind of gets lost in the same pool that is, you should be back to normal now, or I thought this was over, right? Support continues to shift and change based on where that person is in this journey. And as we've talked about a lot, doesn't matter if you know someone with the same diagnosis, same protocol, same treatment plan, none of that matters. That person is having a different experience than the other person you know. And so what they need and support is going to look different. I hate to end this, but I am going to get, yeah, my texts have started to blow up on the whole. I'm technically over time by a couple of minutes. Chris, I cannot thank you enough. I'm getting a sense from the chat, although it was hard to follow because I wanted to be present with you, but it seems like this really resonated as I believed deeply it would. It's just extraordinary to get to share space with you. I look forward to our next 20-minute conversation that lasts an hour and a half, even if we don't have an audience when we do it. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. And I'll in the chat, I'll put all my information, and please do not be afraid to reach out if you need anything. Social media, email, I'll put my number in there. I'll put my website. Like, please feel free to reach out. This is a special community.
Thank you so much, Chris. We're going to take a short break, a little shorter than it was originally planned to be, but I'm thinking you'll forgive me. We'll be back at 11:30 Eastern time for the next session, which is focused on navigating work in cancer, where I know a lot of questions people have been asking all morning are going to get addressed. But